I did a quick analysis of what types of surveys tools are available online, and these are commercial-based surveys that are available online. So Zoomerang is one. Redis means it's not really that good. Don't use it. The cost is about $600 a year or $599 per year. It is customizable. You have unlimited number of surveys, responses, and questions that you could use. You can download your data and your results. SurveyMonkey is one of the cheapest. It's about $204 per year or $17 per month, and it has, you can customize the survey or have number of participants, unlimited number of participants complete the survey. You can have unlimited surveys, and there are a lot of options to design the survey as well as download results. Survey Crafter is again expensive. It's $345 per student license, and you can only get one license per person. The data is hosted on the web server, and you can't, rather than you being in control of the data. It has unlimited number of surveys, questions. You can still download data. But the challenge with all of these is that the data is actually hosted on the server, and you need to be careful about, can you trust that company to be able to be responsible for that data, especially if you're asking some confidential results. Survey Gold, it's not as well known, and the cost is about $110 per license, but you need to pay $55 per year annually after the first year if you want to use their online survey. You can export the data. You don't need to know any coding, and you can customize it. As long as you're a Purdue student, there's a free tool available to Purdue students, staff, and faculty. It's called Purdue Qualtrics Survey. You could have unlimited responses, unlimited surveys. There are a lot of options to design your survey, but it's only valid until your Purdue students are affiliated with Purdue in a certain way. After that, you might have to go to one of those commercial surveys. So things to consider when you're designing web surveys: screen by screen versus scrolling. Typically, I now more see surveys that are screen by screen. So the survey items fit on a screen, and participants click next to go to the next survey. Okay, as opposed to having one long survey that participants need to scroll down. There's some research that suggests there are improved response rates for multiple questions per screen. The completion time is faster. You have fewer non-answered questions, and there's more similarity in answers as compared to a paper-based survey. As opposed to if you have a long survey, people might miss items, so there might be some non-answered question and such. Another issue to consider is plain versus fancy web surveys. So there's some research indicates that if you have a plain survey, a simple-looking survey, it'll lead to higher response rates, as opposed to surveys that have a lot of images and gaudy, for a lack of a better word. It's also important to consider what type of question should be your first question. Okay, research suggests that this is a major dropout point for many respondents. So what should be your first question? I think your first question should never be personal. Okay, age, gender, type of school you're at. I think those demographic questions should go at the end of the survey. At the beginning of the survey, you should focus more on the type of questions you're really interested in. Because if participants have completed the survey, they're more likely to answer the demographic information after they have spent all that time answering your other questions. You need to also consider open-ended versus closed-ended questions. If you have a lot of open-ended questions, the likelihood of people dropping out increases, and there's some research that suggests that, as opposed to closed-ended, which is strongly agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree scale. So you need to think about how many open-ended questions and how many closed-ended questions you should have. So what are some of the things you can do with web surveys? It's important to keep surveys brief and concise. Okay, place confidential information or personal information at the end of the survey. Have response categories in progressive order. Strongly disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree, things like that. Write an introduction to the survey. So explain what your survey is about and what will you do with that information, sort of like the IRB form that you have to fill out, or consent form. use filtering questions. If you could ask participants yes or no, and then take them to different sets of questions based on their response. So the survey doesn't seem like it's endless, even though some items don't apply to them. You should divide your survey into sections rather than having one long survey. So basically use the same convention that you would do for a paper survey in terms of breaking down your survey. Provide adequate instructions. What type of response are you looking for? How should they respond? And how does your layout? And also providing incentives is important. You might not have $50 to give, but you could say if you complete this survey, you'll be entered into a drawing for a $50 Amazon card. And you could say your chances of winning are 1 in 50. So if you want 100 participants in your survey, you have 2 Amazon cards. So your money goes further. I think somebody mentioned online on the discussion forum that they received $2 in the mail, and then people do that to increase the response rate because they think that if you send $2 or $1 in the survey, you're more likely to respond to that survey. So use techniques like that. Things that you should not do is use open-ended questions. You can use too many open-ended questions. Don't use the response category of other. Okay, I think people rarely fill that out, and it doesn't get you much data. Use response scale. Don't use response scale proliferation. For example, Likert scale is 5 items, 5 scale. Strongly disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree. That's a 5 scale is a Likert scale. You can't just don't go 6 or 7 or 8. I've even seen 9 or 10. So you're proliferating the scale. Don't ask participants to rank responses. So don't say, here are 10 categories. Can you please rank order them? Participants, in my experience, are not likely to complete that. Don't design long or excessive surveys because participants will quit midway because it's easy to quit. I can just click X or not send out a survey. Back to you if it's a paper-based survey. And also, don't overuse fancy features. Images, videos. Just keep it simple. Sometimes, truly, less is more. So, in terms of response rates, it varies by how the survey is given to your participants. If you have a mail survey, 50% is considered adequate. If you get 50% responses back, 60% is good, 70% is really good. A phone survey, 80% is good. Email, 40% is average, 50% is good, 60% is very good. When you do an online surveys, 30% is the average of the respondents you get. If you have a classroom paper, greater than 50% is good. If you do face-to-face, 80 to 85% response rate is typically good. So those are something to consider. What type of research you want to conduct and what type of response rates you want to have. So you might look at this slide and say, well, I want to send a survey to a lot of participants. I want to do it online because I can't mail it out or do face-to-face interviews, but I'm okay to accept 30% response rate because if I send it out to 1,000 participants, I'll get 300, which is a good number. So you need to consider those issues. To improve response rates, you should consider emailing cover letters. So email ahead of time, hey, I might be sending out a survey next week. Please look out for that survey in the email. Send follow-up reminders via email. You could say, hey, more formal. Say you received a survey last week. Could you please complete the survey? Pre-notification, which is the same thing as you can email cover letters, which is explain the purpose of the study. But you could pre-notification is you're gonna have the survey coming up next week. Please look out for it. Have simpler formats or plain designs. Mixed mode surveys. So if you want to give a survey, you could give a participant a choice whether they want to do a paper survey or a web-based survey. And finally, have shorter surveys. You don't want endless surveys given out to participants. In terms of constructing the survey itself, think about the problem that you want to assess or solve and what new information you need to solve that problem. And then you design questions based on that. You want to make sure you design questions that are not vague, that don't bias your participants in any particular way, or that lack connection to solving the problem. Okay, and then think about a question type. You know, open-ended or closed-ended questions, and how you're going to word the questions. Again, you want to make sure you don't bias the participants into a particular way. Um, in addition, design a good questionnaire. Consider the format and the printing in terms of if it's a printed survey or if it's an online survey as well. Let's keep it simple. What's the title of the survey to stimulate interest in your survey? Um, what type of questions or what's the order of questions you're going to ask? You know, One method is start with most interesting questions first and then go to most objectionable questions. And start the first question with something that's not open-ended, difficult, embarrassing, or ask something about the individual, personal information. And finally, it's important to field test your survey. So if you want to interview survey teachers, go and field test that survey with some teachers who will not be part of your sample. Ask them, are the questions clear? Does it make sense? Anything they would change? Things like that. So you have some, you make sure that you're on the same page as your participants and you don't have any questions that seem vague or that don't make sense at all. So your pilot testing or field testing might help you remove those, constraints that you might have in the survey. Well, that's all about survey research. Next week is causal comparative. This week there's no online discussion. Okay, so I just want to give you guys a break, and we'll talk about. I'll upload the lectures next week, and I'll give specific examples of what causal comparative research is and such. All right, thanks, guys.